Right. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, CME well number 879 continuous since last 19 years.
Well, so I think we are going to have a class this evening, and Dr. Saptarshi Bhattacharya, who is a senior consultant endocrinologist at Apollo Hospital near Delhi, Sarika, Bihar, and he's a wonderful endocrinologist and diabetologist, and he'll be dealing on, insulin in Indian context. But before that, I must tell you that all the who's and the big luminary of in New Delhi's physician, cardiologist, or the endocrinologist, or anyone who has to launch them. So Physician Forum is a platform. It feels like Kapil Sharma shows, where if you are going to launch a new film, you have to be here. Otherwise, it will not be felt as if you have launched. So I think it is going to be. Who is a great artist that has come and here. So I think all the luminaries are coming here. So if they have to launch in their practice and be successful, come here, get launched by a rocket called Dr. Chauhan and PFI, and then you will have a bright future. So I think on that note, let's hear from Dr. Bhattacharya the use of pre-mixed insulin in Indian context, and it's a very, very important thing. And recently, because of the political insulin, this has become more relevant because it's being given in jails also. So how safe is that? So over to Dr. Bhattacharya.
Thank you, Dr. Viveka. Very, very good evening to all of you. Thanks. So this is my second talk with you. I promised Dr. Chauhan I will come more often, so that didn't happen. But obviously, I look forward to meeting you more often in future. And we are going to talk about a molecule which we know, all of us know, all of us has been using. We know it's very, very essential for management of type 2 diabetes. Obviously, in type 1 diabetes, we can't move a step without that. It's life-saving in type 1 diabetes, but even in type 2 diabetes, so people who are having apprehension that insulin शुरू करूँगा, ये मेरा आदत हो जाएगा, ये तो किडनी खराब कर देगा, मेरा life ending. They know that now somebody, even the biggest of person will require insulin if the sugars go high. And I don't know how many of you read today's newspapers, and it was written that he was advised 2 units of insulin. So this is like a double-edged sword where you need to be careful, where you need to understand why you are giving it, when you are giving it, how you are giving it. So we will, in Indian context, just to go into the science beyond what we have been talking about and laughing about for last some time. So we'll try to understand actually what is the science, how you need to do it, and how is the best way you can prescribe insulin and your patient will benefit most from it. So this is a flow of contents, and there is a problem. So if you are looking into insulin guidelines, they will tell after 2 molecules, 3 molecules, 4 molecules, you start insulin at that point of time. In India, we are not starting insulin after 2-3 molecules. So the patient will not stop coming to you. नहीं डॉक्टर तो 2 दवा के बाद इंसुलिन लेना शुरू कर देते हैं. इनके पास तो जाना ही नहीं है. So in India, people are getting insulin after 3. When I was doing my DM in AIIMS, maybe around 14-15 years back, there are 3 molecules. 1 molecule had just come. So we had the sulfonylureas, we had metformin, we had pioglitazone, gluten and GLP-1, where they were just launched. So then the standard dictum was if somebody is not controlled on 2 or 3 OHAs, should be considered insulin. Now we have almost 5-6 molecules, and in India, so obviously you recommend somebody insulin, that person will go to the other doctor and tell, अच्छा इन्होंने insulin लिख दिया ज़रूरी है. So why we need to start it, how we need to start it. Guidelines will tell you need to start basal insulin. So whether it's the basal insulin which should be taken or you should be going for something which is old and gold. So premixed insulin have been there, and many of you will actually agree that if you are going to start insulin, maybe in Indian context, when you are starting it late, premixed insulin is the way to go forward. So Indian diet is different. So maybe in today's diet we have a mixture of protein and carbohydrate, but majority of our diet, so if you are comparing it to a Caucasian diet, somebody will have a grilled fish and some potato in UK. In India, parathe ke bina to khana nahi banega. So if you go to east, so chawal ke bina to khana hi nahi banega. If you go to south, dosa ke bina to khana hi nahi banega. So it's the diet. So what we are looking at in European studies or maybe in American studies, so there maybe major contribution of their diet will be from protein. In our diet, majority, so you won't have that fulfillment unless you are starting, you are having 60% or 70% of your calories from carbohydrates. So our diet, it's our tradition, there's nothing wrong in it, but we need to accept that it's very, very rich in carbohydrate. And most of the Indian studies will show that we have a significant postprandial surge in the blood glucose, which cannot be covered with a basal insulin alone. So there are some studies that, Western studies will tell that if the HbA1c is more than 9, the majority of the contribution to the high HbA1c comes from fasting plasma glucose. So if you target fasting plasma glucose, somebody's HbA1c is 9.5, and most of you will be able to achieve a significant fall in HbA1c. Once the HbA1c starts coming down into the range of 7.5, 8 or so then there is a significant surge from the postprandial rise. So if somebody is having, so what they mean to say is, if somebody is having a HbA1c of say 8, so what you will see is fasting is 120, 130, post meals will be like 210, 220, and so if you target post meal blood glucose, if somebody is HbA1c in the range of 8, 8.2, so you will be able to reach the required elusive goal of HbA1c less than 7. If somebody's HbA1c is 9.5, 10, 10.5, if you are planning a treatment where you are actually targeting the fasting plasma glucose, a chance of getting a significant lowering of HbA1c more. In India, studies actually don't show that. They say that whatever be the HbA1c, bulk of the elevated blood glucose rise is actually coming from the postprandial surge, and we need to target postprandial glucose very, very strictly, and it has multiple complications. So we have been using the CGMS, which was maybe 10 years back not that easily available. We have the Abbott CGMS. We know that there are significant peaks in blood glucose following our meal, and that increases the oxidative stress, increases the reactive oxygen species. So that will in turn translate more patients. You will have to refer to Dr. Viveka because they will end up with cardiovascular complications. If you want to, so I am being his enemy, but if you want to stop sending more of your patients to Dr. Viveka, maybe, so the peaks and troughs in blood glucose will need to be addressed. So you need to address the postprandial glucose. Somebody having an HbA1c of 7.5, you have a blood fasting plasma glucose of 80 and a postprandial glucose of 190 versus a fasting plasma glucose of say 110 and a postprandial glucose of 165, 170. The chances of having a cardiovascular complication and also some of the macrovascular complication will go up because of multiple mechanisms here. And what we see that even in any category of fasting plasma glucose, if we look into mortality analysis, so a rise in postprandial glucose will translate to a significant increase in mortality. And you will be, at least in our context, if you are targeting postprandial glucose, so you will be achieving the HbA1c more and more. So what in Indian context, so what will you think about starting insulin in Indian context? So as I said that we are, so when most of the guidelines will tell, okay, somebody, you see drugs, 4 drugs, if once he is elevated, you need to start insulin, and basal insulin is going to be the treatment of choice. So that is what ADA says, that is what the European guidelines will say. So first of all, if you are addressing the question, are you starting insulin at the right time? No. We clearly know that because of needle phobia, insulin inertia, patient. So if somebody goes to a physician in US or UK, they don't have that much of choice. So it's their private doctors are beyond the reach of any normal person. Everything is covered by insurance. Their insurance will send him to one particular doctor only. And whatever the doctor tells, if the doctor tells as a GP, as a physician, that person needs to start insulin, whatever insulin that person is being recommended, he needs to start. Having a second opinion is actually beyond their reach. In India, that is not the case. So if you start prescribe a treatment, he has a choice of consulting 10 more doctors within 10 days. Every day he can consult 2, 3, 4 doctors, whomever he wants. So obviously, and the insulin, there is a significant insulin inertia, needle phobia. So apart from what we have seen, that insulin was for the maybe first time in Indian media history, insulin was shown as a positive molecule. Okay, अच्छा नहीं insulin को जरूरत है, इनको insulin क्यों नहीं दे रहे, कोर्ट से पूछ रहे. So we hardly had a case before this. Otherwise, you start insulin, the person will take opinion from 10 other people, and somebody will tell, okay, अच्छा ये medicine देके देखते हैं, उसको देके देखते हैं, the molecule will get changed. So that keeps on happening. So when we are starting with insulin, we all know the natural history of diabetes is that you start with insulin, maybe when somebody gets diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, already the 70-80% of body's insulin secretion is gone. It's not that somebody is getting diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, comes to you for the first time. So this is not the day when diabetes started. It has a history of 10, 15, 20 years preceding that. So when the insulin secretion already falls to a critical level of less than 70-80%, then only type 2 diabetes gets diagnosed. And the natural history of diabetes is that gradually that insulin, remaining 20-30% insulin will also go. So that is how that is the natural history of diabetes. And all of these medications we have, maybe apart from SGLT2 inhibitor, that will actually depend on the internal insulin secretion to work. So these molecules, be it sulfonylurea, be it metformin, where it's or pioglitazone, where it's acting as an insulin synthesizer, be it a GLP-1 analog, where it will also partly act as a insulin secretor in response to food and also decrease the glucagon surge in the liver. So all these molecules will require some amount of internal insulin to act. If the internal insulin is not there, so that insulin has to be given from outside. So when we are actually dealing with diabetes, we are looking at what that 20-30% window we have left, and most of these molecules will actually act through them. And when somebody is getting prescribed insulin, that means that most of only 5 or 10% is left, and that person will actually require insulin from outside. So we have a lot of choices of insulin as of now, starting from almost 10, 50, 20 molecules of insulin. So even we have the newer analogs like insulin degludec, we have insulin fast-acting aspart, we have even the ultra-rapid Rispro, which is there, which they can even be given before meal. So huge list of insulin, including premixed insulin co-formulation, and we need to understand when and why we need to give a particular type of insulin. So if we are looking into insulin formulation, so there can be human insulin formulation, analog insulin formulation. So there can be short acting, rapid acting. We also have the ultra rapid acting now. So we have a faster acting aspart, we have a ultra rapid Lispro. Both are there, and we have ultra long acting insulin like degludec or Glargine 300, and we have the good old premixed insulin, which is still relevant, and most of our patients, including my practice, where I see that type 2 diabetes who are like already quite late, gone into complication, most of them will be actually receiving premixed insulin. So in case of advanced diabetes with complication, the other option remains a basal bolus regimen, but or not everybody will be able to manage a basal bolus regimen, 3 doses of short acting, 1 dose of long acting. So there are issues with it. So for a practical purpose, for you, for me, for the person who is actually taking insulin, pre-mixed insulin remains a very, very, very important and valid choice. So what does the guidelines say? So if you look into all Western guidelines where they are planning to start insulin after 2-3 medications, so then they will suggest a basal insulin. But you need to understand that basal insulin will, so if you are looking into insulin action, so we all know that insulin gets secreted in 2 ways. There is a constant low dose basal insulin secretion, and with each meal surge there is a surge in insulin secretion, which is a prandial insulin. So if you are giving basal insulin at a stage, so if somebody has come to you, received 2 or 3 OHs and very serious about his blood glucose, and you are planning to start insulin, H1 is maybe 8.5, maybe that is the right time to start basal insulin. But if you are looking into somebody who is already on a glimepiride, a reasonable dose, metformin, reasonable dose, gliptin, maybe a SGLT2 inhibitor, or a gliptin, or you maybe even can be even on a GLP-1 analog, and you are planning to start insulin because in spite of all those the H1 is 9.4. So that person is very, very unlikely to have elicit a response of a prandial insulin rise with the help of this drug. There, if you are looking to start 10-15 years of diabetes, H1 is high, blood sugars are uncontrolled on 3, 4, 5 OHs, if you are starting basal insulin, most probably you won't be able to reach there. So there you will have to think of a premixed insulin. So even though most European or Western guidelines will suggest that basal insulin is the starting insulin, but we really need to think about it. So whatever the Western guidelines are telling, their diet is different. It's bulk of the diet is protein. Our diet is different. Bulk of the diet will be carbohydrate. So even a NICE also says that if you are thinking of starting insulin, H1 is more than 9, you can straight away start with a premixed insulin versus a basal insulin. And in fact, our data, the RSSGI 2022 guidelines suggest that you can very well start with a premixed or a co-formulation if you are planning to start insulin. So we slightly deviate from what the Western guideline says, considering our diet, the time we start insulin, and some very practical points. So if we stop talking about guidelines, patient comes to you, fasting plus reasonable diet, reasonable amount of OHs, H1 is uncontrolled. Say somebody's fasting is say 170 and post meal is say 200. Then maybe that person you can consider a basal insulin. Somebody comes to you, fasting is 170, 180, post meal is 250, 260, 270. To start a basal insulin, even if the fasting comes down to say 110, 120, still the post meal will be 210 to 220. So simply looking at the post meal surge, actually you can decide whether basal insulin is required or until डॉक्टर साहब हमें इंसुलिन तो शुरू कर दे, इंजेक्शन में लग रहा है, शुगर तो कंट्रोल हो नहीं रहा है. So here simple looking at the postprandial surge will give you an idea whether that person will benefit from a basal insulin or a premixed insulin. So there are multiple other criteria, but again I won't go into the details of it. It's a busy slide. So what you are factoring, you look into the H1C, look into fasting, look into post meal. If there is significant surge, if not just one time, maybe somebody took a particular type of high carbohydrate diet on a particular day and there was a post meal spike. So you ask the patient to monitor the blood glucose, comes back to you after some time, and if you see there is a persistent post meal spike, basal insulin is not going to work. And sadly what happens is that most of our patients are like that. So fasting will be 100, 30, 40, 50, post meal will be 240, 250, 280, and you will actually need to require insulin. So if there is a post meal surge, So this is what I told, and this is what the slide summarizes, that if the post-meal surge is less than 30-40, basal insulin is okay. If the post-meal surge starts going above 70, 80, 90, most probably even if you are adding a alpha glucosidase inhibitor or maybe a meglitidine, so that will most probably not, maybe in some cases it might cover. But if you are looking into somebody, diabetes 15-20 years, already significant post-meal strike, HbA1c is more than 9.5%, you throw a premixed insulin versus a basal will be a better choice. And what does the meta-analysis say? That there are some studies where basal bolus regimen, which is theoretically the most physiological way to give insulin. The most physiological way may be an insulin pump. Not everybody in India can afford 3, 4, 5 lakhs to start with and maintain it with say another 20-30,000 every month. So we have the choice between premixed insulin versus a basal bolus regimen. Basal bolus regimen becomes slightly complicated because the person has to inject 2 different types of insulin. So you see prandial insulins to cover the post-meal surge. Some of them will tell, नहीं मेरे को तो ऑफिस जाना होता है, मैं लंच वाला इंसुलिन तो नहीं ले सकता. So in that case, if somebody is taking a fasting breakfast prandial insulin, dinner time prandial insulin, lunch time he is not taking insulin because he is in the office. So most probably that's not going to work. So there will be huge post-meal surge after lunch. So if the person is taking lunch, so we need to give insulin. So if insulin is required for breakfast, if insulin is required for dinner, insulin will also be required for lunch. So you can't have a physiology where नहीं lunch में मैं दवा से cover कर लूँगा, तो दवा से cover होता तो बाकी भी सारे दवा से cover हो जाता. So that doesn't happen. So actually what basal bolus versus premixed meta-analysis shows that there is no significant difference in hypoglycemia or HbA1c, almost similar values in HbA1c, and there are some advantages, some disadvantages. Again, if you go into hardcore randomized controlled trial data, it's almost similar result. But we do know that in some situations, basal bolus will be required. One is type 1 diabetes, do not manage type 1 diabetes with a premixed insulin. Another situation, even though the guidelines suggest that in pregnancy or gestational diabetes you might give a premixed insulin, but the precise glycemic control you require, the precise target you have for the well-being of the baby, you most probably won't be able to manage with the premixed insulin. So 2 situations where I will strongly suggest that you do not give premixed insulin will be a type 1 diabetes, and also a case, a lady with pregnancy, be it a pre-existing type 1, pre-existing type 2, even in gestational diabetes, you won't be able to achieve those strict targets. Otherwise, you can give a high mixed insulin, low mixed insulin. So what is a high mixed insulin? So sometimes a patient comes and tells, अच्छा डॉक्टर साहब 25 वाला इंसुलिन में तो कंट्रोल हो नहीं रहा, 50 वाला कर दूं. So that is obviously not the case. We will go into a case actually to make you understand that why you need to give shift maybe from if you are taking Lispro mix 25-75 versus Lispro mix 50, why you actually need to do that. So having said the theoretical part, we will look into 2 cases. So this is a 52-year-old female, type 2 diabetes, treated for 12 years, A1C 9.3. These are the lab results. Creatinine 1.1, A1C clearly elevated, significant jump after from fasting to post-meal, almost more than 110. LDL uncontrolled, needs statin strongly, liver function normal. Current medication, sitagliptin, glimepiride, metformin. So this is like a hypothetical patient, but this is like a very common patient in our clinical practice. So this is not something which is very, very unusual. So in this case, with a significant surge in postprandial glucose, and that is what the evidence will also tell, that you need to add a premixed insulin twice daily in most of the situations. So there are some confusions, and then the patient will ask, Doctor Sahab, dawa bhi chalega, insulin bhi chalega. So if you are starting insulin, most probably you need to continue with metformin, which is an insulin sensitizer, otherwise the dose will go up. Gliptin, which will also decrease the variability in glucose, you need to continue. If the person is a candidate for an SGLT2 inhibitor, that also you need to continue. Maybe you can stop or taper down the sulfonylurea, but rest of the 3 medications. So insulin is good. Insulin is required if you are looking at a person long-term diabetes, uncontrolled on weights, and so person will require insulin. But again, try to combine it with weights which are complementary to it. Don't give weights which are like supplementary to it. So don't combine sulfonylureas or insulin, especially in elderly. They increase the chance of hypoglycemia slightly unpredictably, but most of your patients will actually benefit from metformin along with insulin, because the insulin dose will be less with that. Most of your patients will be benefiting from a GLP-1 analog or a DPP-4 inhibitor along with it. Most of your patients will also be benefiting from an SGLT2 inhibitor along with it. In my personal practice, I do not use pioglitazone along with insulin, because that increase the chance of fluid retention, increase the chance of CHF, increase the chance of weight gain. So I don't personally combine those two, but for the other 3, it's strongly recommended that you should be combining. And insulin, if you are able to control somebody's glucose with say 20, 25, 30 units of insulin per day versus 45, 50, 60 units of insulin per day, only maybe on metformin as a supplemental medicine. The advantages of lower dose of insulin is that the chance of weight gain is going to be less. The chance of glycemic fluctuation is going to be less. Even the chance of unpredictable hypoglycemia is going to be less. So try to combine medications which are complementary to insulin, so that's what is usually recommended. Otherwise, basal insulin, premixed insulin, there are studies that hypoglycemia is no significant difference, you can continue. So this patient was started on 10 units before breakfast, but for a practical purpose, if you are looking at a HbA1c of 9.2, 9.5, 4, 5 medicines, you need to start with 2 doses, don't start with 1 dose, start with 2 doses straight away. And you need to explain about the titration. So most of the patients will feel, अच्छा मेरा तो आज का शुगर 140 है, तो आज इंसुलिन में 10 यूनिट लगा लेता हूँ, आज का मेरा शुगर 105 है, तो मैं 5 यूनिट लगा लेता हूँ, आज मेरा शुगर 200 है. So premixed insulin doesn't work like that. You are not looking into a type 1 diabetes where you are going to carb count, give correctional insulin, give supplemental insulin. You are not looking into that. So premixed insulin works in a different way. So if you are giving a morning dose of insulin, if the daytime sugars are controlled, that means the morning dose is adequate. If you are giving a night dose of insulin, if the fasting is okay, that means the night dose is adequate. So the person who is taking his before dinner sugar, if the sugar is 130, 140 at dinner time, that means the morning dose was right. That does not mean that the fasting requirement, nighttime requirement of insulin has gone down and the person will not require nighttime insulin or a reduced dose of insulin. What will determine the nighttime dose of insulin is the trend towards the fasting plasma glucose over the last 3-4 days. If that is normal with a particular dose of insulin, that dose of insulin should be continued. So again, you need to educate the patient about slightly, maybe not everybody will be able to understand all those intricacies, but if somebody who is responsible can take care of what is actually required, you will, if you slight self-titration, if you can explain, that will be good. Obviously, you need to explain when to decrease the dose for hypoglycemia, very, very, very critical. If somebody is having hypoglycemia, first, they need to understand why that person has hypoglycememia. If it is not due to an error which has occurred because of that person, obviously insulin dose reduction is recommended. So that's what was done for the patient. Glimepiride was discontinued, metformin and gliptins were continued, and the glycemic control was quite good. So this is something what we were discussing about mid-mixed insulin, high-mixed insulin. So this is a particular situation where you can actually shift from a 25 premix or a 30 premix to a 50 premix. So you have this person not controlled on sugars, and you have this pattern already on Lispromix 24 and 16. Glimepiride 2 mg most probably we can discontinue, maybe SGLT2 inhibitor we can add if the person is able to tolerate. So you have a post-meal post-breakfast blood sugar which is high. The before dinner is going down. The before dinner 108, fasting is not that uncontrolled, maybe a carryover of overall uncontrolled hypoglycemia. So if you have a situation where there is a surge in post-breakfast blood glucose, the before dinner blood glucose or the after lunch blood glucose is showing a downward trend. So in that particular situation, you can actually shift from a premix 25 to a premix 50. So premix 50 will control the post-meal surge in blood glucose, and the trend towards lower blood glucose before dinner, that can also be controlled. So in this case, the patient was actually shifted from premix 50. We have given evidence for that. Again, I am not going to go into the details. Dr. Viveka's patient is waiting. I won't take much more time. So patients have reasonable amount of similar incidence of severe hypoglycemia. So shifting in this case, where with a particular dose of 25 premix, at dinner time the fasting was controlled, the after dinner was controlled, so we continue with the 25 premix. Since this person, maybe because of his diet or for whatever reason, had a surge in post-breakfast sugar, and the pre-dinner values and the after-lunch values were showing a downward trend. So if you shift to a premix 50-50, what will happen? So you will be giving more coverage for the immediate post-breakfast blood sugar, but the post-lunch blood sugar and the before dinner blood sugar which were going down, so that 75% insulin will be less and the chance of hypoglycemia will go down. So an ideal candidate where you can actually shift from a 25 mix 25 to a mix 50 for breakfast, and you can, since the fasting and the after dinner was almost okay, you can continue with the premix 25 at night time. So finally, to summarize, so this is something again, so insulin is not only required for political reason, insulin will be required for most type 2 diabetes who actually who have 15-20 years of diabetes, have no insulin reserve. We have thousands of patients, thousands, lakhs, millions of patients like that. So whatever medications you do, unless you give insulin, and maybe you can supplement with complementary medications, so the glycemic control is not going to get achieved. Indian diet, very rich in carbohydrate, so you need to add a premixed insulin, even though the Western guidelines will suggest. So what happens is that the patient started on a night dose of basal insulin, the fasting tends to get lower and lower, the post meal still tends to get higher, and there are some patient, नहीं मेरा तो fasting तो 780 था, खाने के बाद मेरा 250 आया था, इसलिए मैंने ग्लार्जिन को बढ़ा लिया और 4 यूनिट. So that again is a very common mistake, should not be done. So you need to make them understand that if somebody is injecting insulin, some amount of understanding, some amount of education is actually required. Without that, actually it's very difficult to manage insulin. And in my personal practice, if you say that how many patients are you starting on, this is not because I am giving a talk on Humalog Mix 25, this is what I actually do in my practice. So in 80-90% of my cases, I will be starting on a premixed insulin for most of my type 2 diabetes who are having diabetes for 10-15 years and actually having insulin deficient. So they will require both basal insulin component as well as the prandial insulin component to control their blood glucose. If there are any questions, I will be happy to answer. Back to the chairperson.
Well, so I think first of all we must give a big hand wonderful talk and clarifying that how to start with premixed insulin infusion, especially in Indian subject. And I just said that I have got some commitments. So I will request Dr. JPS Tulsi, who is none other than standing.
So the chairperson is not allowed to ask questions, right?
So chairperson will not ask the question. That is why it is a match fixing. Now,
I am not the chairperson.
No, the acting chairperson also can't ask questions.
So he is a table person, so he'll ask the questions. So over to Dr. JPS Tulsi, and we'll see you sometime later. Okay, thank you very much. But must compliment Dr. Saptarshi for clarifying a lot of doubts about fears of insulin in Indian context, and I think that is something which is very important. And as he rightly said, that in Indian context, one should have you need to allay the fear of needle, and more than that, you need to allay the fear of sugar. That sugar is the mother of all diseases, especially the cardiovascular disease. So control sugar and how you control it, that is something which matters most. So over to Dr. Tulsi, and good night, and see you sometime later.
But
Dr. Viveka, can I ask one question to you before you leave?
Very good.
So, insulins cause hypos and weight gain. So, as we know, cardiac thrombotic events and dysarrhythmias are common if you have hypos. So, after 100 years of insulin today, are they safe? They are very, very safe to improve, even at hyperglycemia, but on the long run, they may cause weight gain and hypos and dysrhythmias and certain cardiac arrest as well if you have hypos. So, are insulin safe? We know in ICUs they are very safe, but in routine practice they are no longer recommended, especially the IV insulin, sir.
I think insulin is very safe, but you need to know how to use insulin and how to dose it. And insulin is, remember that is the natural source of controlling the blood sugar. So insulin is safe. We came from now to human insulin, so that is much more safer. And definitely there are a lot of intricacies in that, but insulin is the crux of managing diabetes. So let me very be clear on
Very
that.
good.
So that is what I think I'll here request Dr. Satrushi to demystify insulin in diabetes, because that is the natural source to control the sugar, and that is what it should naturally be.
So maybe I can add a point. So most of the confusion related to hypoglycemia and increased mortality that came from the ACCORD trial, where it showed a increased mortality in the intensive glycemic control, glycemic arm with strict control. But what you also, if you look closely into the ACCORD trial data, what you get to see is that this is one of the trials which had actually the lowest cardiovascular mortality. So there was a difference between the intensive arm and the stand-up arm. But if you compare it with any other cardiovascular trial, so that was one trial which had actually the lowest cardiovascular mortality. So obviously hypoglycemia should be avoided. You need to know how to titrate, how to adjust. You need to tell your patient how to have proper precautions for hypoglycemia. But again, so in spite of so much of confusion related to that and bad naming related to that trial. So if you look into the trial, the mortality rates, the CV rates were actually in both the arms were very, very low with the glycemic curve. Very good.
So, Dr. Bhattacharya, so what a wonderful talk. Always a pleasure to listen to you. So, choosing the best insulin regimen for initiation, intensification and optimization is still debatable. How do you choose which insulin? Would you prefer a basal insulin? Would you prefer premixes or a basal bolus or a basal plus insulin? How do you go about? After the OHs have failed, how do you go about? And at what HbA1c? Does HbA1c matter here? How do you choose and when do you start the insulin regimen?
So again, obviously HbA1c can be a matter, but again you look into the blood glucose profile of that patient. So if the person is monitoring glucose at home, and you look into the difference between the fasting and the post-meal glucose. If there is a significant jump in the post-meal glucose above, say somebody starts with a fasting of 150 like we showed in the example, and the post-meal is going up to 260, that person will not get controlled with basal insulin. You tell your patient that you need to start premixed insulin straight away. There is a significant postprandial surge, and most of our patients are like that because they are starting insulin not after 2-3 drugs, not after 7-8 years of diabetes. They are starting insulin after 10, 15, 20 years of diabetes, where they have tried 10 doctors and the same combination, different formulations of same medicine from different doctors 10 times. Then only they will start insulin. That is what happens with 80% of Indian patients. Some patients are very diligent. They will, अच्छा थोड़ा सा sugar बढ़ गया, doctor के पास गया, doctor they will tell whatever the doctor is doing, but they will be in the minority. Majority of patient will go from one doctor to another. वो एक OH से दूसरे OH होगा, दूसरे से तीसरे होगा, तो उसमें किसी में infection होगा, किसी में ये होगा. So for us, for me, if you are not going into that, if you are actually thinking of starting insulin, majority of our patients will be fitting into the criteria where they have actually insulinopenic. They require both prandial coverage as well as basal coverage, and a basal insulin is very, very unlikely to achieve optimal glycemic control. If somebody is ready to go for early insulinization, in that particular situation, if you are thinking of starting insulin, number of OHS 2, 3, H1 is not very high, and there is not a significant, because if you go into physiology, the first phase of insulin secretion is one of the first to go down in type 2 diabetes physiology. So if that is not there, there is going to be bound to be a postprandial surge. So most of our patients, 80-90% will actually require premixed insulin to start with. If you ask the patient is diligent, coming to you with proper monitoring of blood glucose, you have multiple values of fasting and PP, but there is not much of difference. In those 10-20% patient, you can actually start with a basal insulin like Glargine or Degludec. In all other cases, you will require premixed.
Wonderful, sir. So talk us through about the premixes insulin analogs versus, the premixed insulin. They have several advantages. Talk us through the premixed analog insulins versus the premixed insulins.
So if you look into the HbA1c differences from meta-analysis, premixed analog versus premixed normal insulin, there is actually no difference. There is difference in the cost will be almost 3 times. So if somebody is having really a concern related to cost, so you can very well give a mixed human insulin premixed formulation, regular insulin and NPH combination. But the person will benefit from an analog premixed combination if somebody is having a very busy lifestyle. मैं इंसुलिन लगाने के बाद आधा घंटा नहीं वेट कर सकता. So you need to understand the main difference between a analog insulin versus a regular insulin based analog is the onset is 30 minutes. So if somebody is injecting a regular insulin NPH combination, the postprandial glucose, it might get documented, it might not get documented. So there is a mismatch between the physiology there. So if somebody is not able to wait for 30 minutes after injecting insulin, should be put on an analog insulin. There are some studies which show that if you are giving a premixed analog insulin, there is some benefit in postprandial hyperglycemia control. Some patients actually have a peak and followed by a delayed hypoglycemia after 3-4 hours. So again, those particular group of patients might benefit from a premixed analog. So if you are going to go for a premixed analog, it comes at a increased cost. 3-4 major advantages. One, time between injecting and having food, 0 to 5 minutes, 10 minutes, depending on the patient's convenience. If somebody is having a significant postprandial surge at 2 hours and you are not able to control with a conventional analog, conventional premixed formulation, you can try a premixed one. If somebody has a hypoglycemia at say patient आके कहते हैं नहीं मेरा लंग्स तक जाते जाते मैं ये 30-70 में लगा तो लेता हूँ लेकिन मेरा लंग्स तक जाते जाते 1 बजे शुगर घट जाता है. So maybe in that particular case an analog will be better because it is slightly shorter acting insulin. See situation, and it obviously convenience matters. So maybe for many of our patients the cost will not matter. For some it will do matter. So you need to talk to your patient. If the cost is not a issue, maybe because of the convenience we tend to go and more for premixed analog. But I am totally comfortable with a premixed regular formulation also. If the patient is having a cost related issue.
Dr. Bhattacharya is convinced that both are same, but for the benefit of our hosts today, some studies did say less hypos, less weight gain, and probably slightly better glycemic control, fasting, PP, and HbA1c. Some studies did talk about this.
HbA1c control will be similar. Studies do suggest there is a difference between postprandial glucose and the risk of post-meal delayed hypoglycemia, but that again does not translate to a better HbA1c. So again, I will leave it to the cost. If the person is able to afford, you go for a premixed analog because of the convenience. I can assure you, 90% of patients who is using a premixed regular formulation don't even wait for 5 minutes after injecting it, and that is a wrong way of injecting it.
Right. So let's dwell, a little away from insulins and talk about the GLP-1 agonists, which today, are probably, the various international guidelines are recommending GLP-1 agonists in place of insulins because of its cardiovascular and renal benefits. Talk us through that, sir. Maybe 2 words.
So again, if we are looking about...
Does insulin have any cardiovascular benefits, any renal benefits?
So again, we don't have a study which suggests
No
that...
RCTs.
So we suggest that insulin will be, if you are giving insulin versus any other standard of care where glycemic control is adequate. So insulin has not shown additional cardiac safety, additional renal safety, additional liver safety. So that studies have not been there. So maybe you can
They
talk
are neutral drugs as Origin and Devote trials.
They are neutral drugs. Maybe if you talk about EQPDS where they were using insulins like LPH and regular insulin, they didn't have the analog, they didn't have degludec. That even is still showing benefit versus conventional treatment. That is a different issue. So first of all, they are safe. But if you are talking about insulin versus GLP-1 analog, so again, if you are looking into 15-20 years of diabetes, where the person is not having internal insulin reserve, the person is insulinopenic, nothing else other than insulin will work.
Absolutely.
So, but if somebody is maybe 8-10 years of diabetes, you are thinking of starting a basal insulin versus an GLP-1 analog, because the newer GLP analogs actually even can bring down the HbA1c by 1.5%. So no other molecule other than maybe a sulfonylurea in some of the studies and insulin can bring down HbA1c to that level. So if you are looking at a HbA1c of say 8.5 or 9 and you are planning to start a GLP-1 analog, and maybe in that case it might still achieve adequate glycemic control provided the duration of diabetes is not very long, but the person has become insulin.
Wonderful, sir. My last question to you. So, after that multi-central diet sugar trial, Dr. Kalra would know about it.
Yeah.
See, IV insulin can no longer be recommended as a routine, but should be reserved only for patients undergoing cardiac surgeries or in critically ill patients. So talk us through the night sugar trial, because the pendulum has shifted, you see, from IV insulin for everybody in ICU to no longer now. Go ahead, sir.
So again, if
Podar has surgery, he does that, and no longer recommended IV insulin.
In ketoacidosis also you have to do well.
so IV insulin is strongly recommended in diabetic ketoacidosis. So in other
Cardiac surgery as well,
in cardiac surgery as well.
critical ill patients as well.
See, if somebody is in an ICU, the person will benefit from an IV insulin depending on the regimen that particular institute is going to follow.
Very good.
But if you are looking into insulin, night sugar trial was more about whether you need to go for an intensive glycemic control in ICU versus a conventional glycemic control. So if you are trying to reach a level of 110 to 140 to land up with more hypoglycemia, and you actually do more harm. If your person is in ICU, try to maintain the blood glucose even post cardiac surgery. If you are giving IV insulin, you try to maintain it between 140 to 180. The outcomes are actually better. No risk of hypoglycemia. So don't try to reach like 110, 120 with IV insulin. The chance of hypoglycemia will be more and long term.
I want to ask.
please. Promised us long ago. फिर मिलेंगे कभी इस बात का वादा कर दो, एक और हंसी मुलाकात का वादा कर दो। सर आप मिले नहीं, वो हंसी मुलाकात तो फिर रह गई।
So you need to tell them this. Why are they?
ये तो पहली बार है सर, ये लोग तो पहली बार है। ये लोग तो सर प्लीज सर, ये लोग तो पहली बार आए सर। ना हसीन ना मुलाकात कुछ नहीं सर। इन लोगों से तो मुलाकात नहीं सर, मुक्कालात। सर wonderful presentation. I was really impressed. यार वेरी गुड क्या हो गया यार? अभी तो कुछ बोला ही नहीं। वेरी गुड हो गया। यार सुन तो ले। अभी तो सुना ही नहीं। यार सर नहीं। भाई लिसन। अरे सुनो यार, बात सुनो यार प्लीज। इम्पोर्टेंट बात कर रहा हूँ। सर अगर मेरा पेशेंट ये कहे कि डॉक्टर मुझे प्री मिक्स नहीं चाहिए, मुझे आप प्री मील बोनसेस दो, बेड टाइम बेजल दो, आई एम कंफर्टेबल विद इट, इफ दिस इज द बेस्ट स्ट्रेटेजी, इज देयर एनी हेड टू हेड ट्रायल बिटवीन प्री मील बोनसेस, बेड टाइम बेजल एंड प्री मिक्सेस, which one is better? Any head to head trial ever?
Basal bolus regimen versus premix.
Premix.
So there are multiple head-to-head trials.
Which one is better?
Even meta-analysis, HbA1c there is no difference. Less chance of maybe hypoglycemia with the basal bolus regimen because you have a better basal insulin in the basal bolus regimen. Most of you, apart from the co-formulation which is degludec aspart combination, where because of the flat nature there is a gap in the lunch time coverage. NPH will cover the lunch also. So most of the insulin, premixed insulin, so there will be a peak. So we are not using NPH insulin as a basal insulin anymore. Maybe you were doing 20 years earlier, but since Glargine came in, we know it's a flatter curve. So these patients do have some amount of nighttime hypoglycemia. Maybe if you start putting regularly and CGMS patch in most of our patients, there will be some hypoglycemia. So the most physiological way to give insulin, if person is absolutely insulinopenic, the basal bolus regimen will be better in my personal opinion. But not if basal bolus regimen which is mismanaged is worse than a premixed insulin which is well managed. So you need to take into account the person's response and
Dr. Nigam sir, Dr. Vimal, we are into an important discussion.
So
we will benefit with it.
So
you will benefit from it.
we need to take into the account the patient's education, motivation, and the amount of charting, blood glucose charting at home the person is ready to do. If the person is motivated, person wants to do it, basal bolus regimen, obviously my personal preference will be that. If somebody tells, "Achha, mera premix day versus basal bolus hai, I am ready to do whatever you are telling, I will go for a basal bolus." But if somebody is reluctant, which is the case in most of our patients, you are actually trying to convince, नहीं आपका body में insulin बन नहीं रहा है, आपको insulin चाहिए, आप ठीक है एक बार से नहीं होगा, आप कम से कम 2 बार तो लगा लो. उस time में you try to force the basal bolus, they will make a mess of it.
Sir, you very rightly mentioned that if the patient is on basal bolus versus premixes, the chances of hypoglycemia are more with the premixes. I got it correct, sir? Right. Now, all these episodes of hypoglycemia are related, correlated, or they actually correlate into more cardiovascular events. You agree, sir?
So again, if you look into the meta-analysis, it was there in one of the slides. I did not go into the details of that for the sake of time. The HbA1c difference was 0.09%.
Sir, I am not talking about the
Cardiovascular
difference. I am talking about the real episodes of hypoglycemia which can cause ventricular tachycardia and ventricular arrhythmias.
So theoretically, any hypoglycemia can cause cardiac abnormalities, including rhythm abnormalities, but we do not have any long-term CV outcome trial. We have HbA1c trial, we have hypoglycemia trial, but if we are like whether we have trials for GLP-1 analogs, we have trial for gliptins, we have trial for SGLT2. These two regimen, long-term CV outcome trial, I think we should have it, but I am not aware of any particular trial which have followed it for 4 or 5 years to study the CV outcome. Most probably you are right, if such a trial is conducted, there might be a difference in terms of CV outcome.
Right. Sir, I want to ask you a very honest question from a very eminent endocrinologist. Sir, practicing diabetes in 1970s was different from practicing diabetes in 1980s, which was different from practicing diabetes in 1990 and still different from practicing diabetes in 2000. Now, we had some wonderful molecules which started coming in 2005, 2006, sitagliptin, DPP-4 inhibitors, and then we had this wonderful molecule in 2014-15, the SGLT2 inhibitors. And we were told that if you start on these molecules, you start having target organ protection. If you use empagliflozin, you have 38% risk reduction in mortality as far as the total mortality is concerned. You have more than 34% risk reduction in hospitalization because of heart failure. You have 14% risk reduction in MACE. Sir, as I understand, we've been using insulin since 1921. Do we have any study till date which tells us that we have target organ protection with insulin? Like a trial which matches with Credence for canagliflozin, which matches with DAPA-CKD for dapagliflozin, which matches for empagliflozin like EMPA-CKD. Do we have target organ protection with insulins, or we only have the pleasure of achieving a good HbA1c, a good fasting plasma glucose and a good PP glucose, sir? Your honest comment on that.
So I think we need to understand before answering that question that the context in which these trials were done. So these trials were actually done not because of the rosiglitazone saga. So where it was one meta-analysis by showed that there is increased cardiovascular mortality with rosiglitazone, and so the FDA mandated that any new drug after approval has to go a CV outcome trial. So these trials were specifically designed to have CV outcome in a high-risk group. So the person is receiving standard of care in one group, the person is receiving standard of care in addition to the that molecule in the other group. The HbA1c target for both the groups are going to be same. So you are not looking at HbA1c control if you are giving these two molecules. So if on top of standard of care adding this molecule, apart from, in spite of maintaining HbA1c in the similar level, is going to have a improved CV outcome. So these molecules like SGLT2 inhibitors and GLP analogs, many of them showed that there is going to be CV benefit. So as of now, if we do a trial, if the person is having an advanced cardiovascular, maybe had a past history of MI, like in somebody in the EMPA trial, and you are giving insulin versus you are not giving insulin. First of all, many of the patients will not get controlled without insulin. So we are not looking into the glycemic benefit of such. So if you are looking into glycemic benefits, you look into UPPDS, where insulin is like regular insulin, NPH insulin, Lente, Ultra Lente, these are the insulins which were tried, and these patients were either into glycemic control in the intensivers versus standard arm. They showed microvascular benefit at the end of 10, 15, 20 years when the trial ended. Follow-up trial after UKPDS legacy, in spite of glycemic control being lost, initial intensive glycemic control even using these arms. Also they were receiving medications like glibenclamide and chlorpromamide, not the newer sulfonylureas also. They maintained benefit in terms of microvascular, and the macrovascular effect benefit also came in. So that is called the legacy effect of UKPDS. And in last year, the 2023 in the EASD, the 25-30 years of follow-up UKPDS data, close to 500 patients in the system, in spite of no glycemic control, initial intensive glycemic control, even with these molecules, so actually that translated into improved cardiovascular outcome. So we cannot compare a empagliflozin or a liraglutide or semaglutide with insulin. So it's very difficult, maybe it's ethically not possible. It's somebody who is requiring insulin for glycemic control. In that case, you tell, I will not give insulin, I will give a GLP analog and try to compare with it. So this type of trial to show or translate into CV benefit has not been done and will ethically be very difficult to do. So we cannot compare the roti and egg, barabar ek हम compare नहीं कर सकते. So we cannot compare insulin and an SGLT2 inhibitor.
Wonderful observation.
Sir, wonderful observation. Now coming to a practical question. When I started understanding diabetes in Maulana Azad under Dr. NPS Verma, I did my house job. We had very few molecules. Very good, Dr. Sunil Kapoor sir said. I heard Dr. Sunil Kapoor saying very good. Sir, thank you, sir. Thank you. Dr. NPS Verma, sir. Sir, we started doing house job under him. We had actually not even metformin, we had metformin at that time. And the second molecule was either glibenclamide or chlorpromamide. These were the, and they are ended the entire thing, and then the insulin. That was in 1984, sir, 1985. And then I was doing my MD medicine, sir. We came across a molecule called Acafus. It was launched in India, sir, and it was supposed to be very good. And when we started giving this to, every 7-10 days the patient used to come and, he was looking for a doctor who started the medication because he was always bloated. So there was a problem. And then we had the introduction of Damacron in India. So sulfonylureas. And then we had the introduction of glimepiride later. So our journey started with fenformin, converted to metformin, came on to sulfonylureas, came into AGIs, and then we were told to start people on insulin. Dr. Anil Gupta sir would agree. There was nothing else after that. Only insulin and various combinations of insulin which should be beautifully described, sir. Sir, in your experience of last 15 years, do you delay insulinization because of the introduction of molecules like DPP-4 inhibitors, like SGLT2 inhibitors, and like GLP-1 inhibitors? Your honest comment on that.
As long as if somebody, maybe if you go into ADA guidelines 10-15 years back, the ADA recommended, there was a clear-cut line, if somebody is not controlled on 2 to 3 OHs, you need to start insulin. If you go through ADA 2024 guideline, last 4, 5, 7 year guideline, so there is actually no evidence to suggest that if somebody is controlled on maybe a glimepiride and metformin combination, which is standard approved combination world over, and maybe a SGLT2 DPP-4 inhibitor combination. So if a person is controlled on that, is having an HbA1c of say 6.5, 6.7. So I personally don't think that we should go back to the old dictum. So that was there when there were not medications which actually demonstrated CV benefit or renal protection. So if as long you are giving a rational combination of medication, so you are not a person is having a recurrent episodes of UTI and still keep on pushing SGLT2, person is having diarrhea and keep on pushing metformin, person is having osteoporosis and keep on pushing pioglitazone. If you are giving a rational combination of medication, rational combination, obviously all of us are educated and well read enough to understand what is a rational combination. As long as you are keeping that and not causing any side effect, the glycemic control is achieved. We don't need to add insulin just to follow the old dictum of adherence.
Sir, it's good that you mentioned the ADA guidelines, the EASD guidelines. And if you see the guidelines of the last 5 years, ADA, EASD, standard of care, they do not mention HbA1c. They mention now the risk scoring. What is your risk? Atherosclerotic risk. And if you have atherosclerotic risk, which is more than 20%, then it is mandatory for us to start a patient on SGLT2 inhibitor and GLP-1 analog. No mention of insulin. If your patient has a risk score of 10 to 20%, it is your duty bound to start your patient on a GLP-1 analog and an SGLT2 inhibitor to protect vital organs, target organ protection, and you are now concentrating on the atherosclerotic process, and that is what brings me to my next question and the last one, sir.
Very well said, sir.
Sir, insulin is a growth hormone. Am I right?
Anabolic hormone.
It's an anabolic hormone.
Yeah.
And in no way it is an anti-atherosclerotic hormone. In no way. Sir, if my patient has a risk score, Framingham score, Osprey score of more than 20%, should I then be concentrating on HbA1c or protecting his target organs? That brings me to my first question, sir, and put him on an SGLT2 inhibitor, and or taking lessons from the leader trial, put him on a GLP-1 analog.
So again, so what the approach to diabetes management has changed. So it's a number, not a number which matters. So if somebody...
Because you mentioned the guidelines, sir, and the guidelines have changed dramatically.
So if somebody is having an HbA1c of 6.7 and whatever medication the person might be taking and is at high risk for maybe having macroalbuminuria, ejection fraction is low, or having a prior history of ASCVD, or the creatinine is showing upward trend, whatever be the HbA1c, you need to add a SGLT2 inhibitor or a GLP-1 analog, irrespective of the glycemic status. So, but if the person is on insulin or sulfonylurea, you need to be careful. You need to down titrate those two molecules, those two doses to avoid hypoglycemia. But we are looking from a cardioprotective and personalized approach to cardioprotection and organ protection for diabetes management. We are not looking at numbers. If a person is on having HbA1c 6.7, whatever medication might be the person might be taking at that time, and my ACR albumin creatinine ratio comes at say 700, the person will require an SGLT2 inhibitor irrespective of that.
Very good. Honest answer, sir. Dr. Poddar, sir.
I think what I have understood, Dr. Bhattacharya can correct if I am wrong, whatever the trials, cardio benefit trials are done with SGLT inhibitors or maybe semaglutide type of drug, it is only you can achieve cardio benefit only when you control blood sugar. And insulin you are giving only when blood sugar is not controlled. So you cannot compare the cardio benefits directly, because insulin you are giving only when blood sugar is not controlled with oral medicines. So head-to-head trial is not possible.
Again, we should not be confusing two aspects.
Yes.
So glycemic benefit still has a cardioprotective effect. Glycemic benefit, if you are able to do without achieving hypoglycemia, will have more cardioprotective effect. So but again, if somebody is having 15-20 years of type 2 diabetes and the HbA1c is 8.5, 9, 9.5, more than 8 or so the person will actually be requiring insulin because there is no insulin reserve in the body. On top of that, if somebody is having macroalbuminuria, you add an SGLT2 inhibitor. If somebody is having a low ejection fraction, you add an SGLT2 inhibitor. If somebody is having an ASCVD, you add a GLP-1 analog. So that risk-based treatment has to be complemented with glycemic management. So you cannot ignore glycemic management just because you have to add an SGLT2 and GLP-1 analog, because UKPDS did show that early intensive glycemic control in type 2 diabetes has long-lasting benefits. So these molecules are good, but that does not take away the benefits of long-term glycemic control.
Sir, since you mentioned UKPDS, I would like to mention and I would like to remind everybody the best trial ever done on diabetes from 1977 to 1997, and then the follow-up of UKPDS for 10 years till 2007. What did we learn from UKPDS? And that is why I am asking again and again the question that I am forced to ask, sir. What were the benefits from UKPDS? The benefits were that there were very impressive results on the front of microvascular complications. But what was there on the macrovascular complications? The best result came from the metformin subgroup, which was 15% risk reduction in the MI, sir. Even in the insulin group, even in the sulfonylurea group, there was nothing, sir. So what was the problem? So what was the problem with the best conducted ever trials on diabetes? The problem was that there was a great micro and macrovascular divide. We achieved nothing on the macrovascular divide. So what was done by SGLT2 inhibitors? SGLT2 inhibitors for the first time in the history of diabetic armamentarium were the drugs which bridge the gap between the micro and the macrovascular complications. How? There was 38% risk reduction in the death. There was 14 to 16% risk reduction in MACE with empagliflozin. This was the first drug ever, not even insulin could do, in the best conducted trials, which Dr. Bhattacharya is repeatedly saying. UKPDS and the follow-up, the legacy effect, everything, nothing changed on the macrovascular front. Only one drug changed the macrovascular scenario, and that was empagliflozin. Am I right, sir?
Yes.
Am I right, sir?
Here, since you raised the point, I will partly agree and partly contradict in one way. First of all, UKPDS was a trial which was done on newly diagnosed type 2 diabetes.
Yes, sir.
The number of macrovascular events even after 20 years of follow-up was not that many to show a difference in macrovascular.
Sir, 20 years is the good enough time.
But
20 years is the good enough time.
But let me finish.
And then the follow-up period of 10 years, 30 years.
So let me finish. So macrovascular outcome, there was a trend towards benefit at the end of 20 years, microvascular outcome, there is a clear-cut benefit.
Very impressive.
Macrovascular benefit did not reach statistical significance. So when these patients were followed up for another 10-15 years, and we have the Equipedia's legacy effect. We have a benefit in terms of both micro and macrovascular outcome.
Sir, but not very impressive. Not so impressive.
Statistically significant macrovascular
statistically
benefit.
significant.
We had in ADA ESD 2022 and 23, we have the follow-up data of 40 years of Equipedias.
Yes, sir.
Still 500 patients in each arm, statistically significant macrovascular benefit. So we have macrovascular benefit from early intensive glycemic control, and you need to remember these follow-up arms were not part of any trial. They were just taking data, so there was no difference in HbA1c between the two groups. So even if you are, the point is that we should not be confusing two parts. First of all, in today's practice, we did not have SGLT2 at that time. If today's practice, if SGLT2 inhibitor is indicated, we should not be denying SGLT2 inhibitor.
That is the whole point.
If somebody can afford a GLP-1 analog, we should not be denying GLP-1 analog. So these two molecules should be used unless contraindicated, affordable and tolerant.
Sir, as you when you give that message, I am fine with it.
So
fine with it.
these two molecules, we need to have a reason not to give.
Yes, sir. I am fine with the message now. Dr. H.L. Kandru, sir.
Here is come up the rule that if we have to give the premix insulin and along with the basal, we should have then because at what level of the prandial we should start it.
So if the prandial gap is more than 60-70, in a normal case, if the fasting glucose is like 110, 120, and the post meal is like say 170, 180, okay. So whenever the gap starts going above say 70, 80, 100, so then actually the glycemic gap, then it causes oxidative stress, more macrovascular complication. So at that point of time, you need to bring in insulin. So anything more than 80-90, you start with premix. Gap less than that, you can give a trial.
So we should start with about 0.1% per unit per kg body weight.
So again,
what is the come of the rule for this?
So again, there are multiple ways of doing it. Maybe my personal way is to look at the body weight, start anything with a lower dose and gradually titrate it up depending on the body weight.
Which of this analog is better as per?
Type 2 maybe 0.1 or 0.2 unit per kg. 0.1 will be for basal insulin, 0.2 unit per kg for premix
Sir,
insulin.
which one of these analogs are better, aspart or glucosilin or this pro? What is the better?
Again, HbA1c related, no difference in terms of hypoglycemia, some difference in some of the trials. So our practical benefits might be different, but most of these analogs will be equivalent in terms of HbA1c reduction. Some benefit maybe in hypoglycemia with glargine 300 or degludec.
So when we are using more than 3 drugs, when we are using 3 drugs and it is not effective, there is fasting as well as PP is raised. So we start this basal insulin or with the analog. So my say is that then we should withdraw one of the drugs.
Sulfonylurea, see, if you are adding a basal insulin, don't withdraw anything. If sulfonylurea has to be continued, metformin has to be continued. If you are giving GLP, DPP-4 or DPP-4, SGLT2, basal insulin is add-on insulin. If you are adding premix or basal bolus, you try to withdraw sulfonylurea.
Sir, I have heard also in newly diabetes, this person has a fasting and PP raised, and we can give insulin, basal insulin also, which can help in apoptosis, anti-inflammatory effect, and that can also save the beta cell mass. What is your say about this?
That is a concept which was there, but again, if the person is ready to take it, you can give for the initial glucotoxicity part. But we have very good molecules as of now. I think we can give sulfonylurea.
Sir, Dr. M.L. Kala.
अभी सर एक थोड़ा पीने भी दो बहुत आंसर दे रहे हैं तीसरे जरा
Last question.
Sir, मैं कोई सवाल नहीं पूछ रहा हूँ, मैं तो ये कह रहा हूँ कि इंसुलिन इज जस्ट लाइक ब्रह्मास्त्र
it has its own side effects, it has indications. So you have to use it judiciously. When it is compelling indication, we have to use it. Then we don't see the side effects and the severe
If somebody is requiring insulin, we will require insulin.
One comment is about Dr. Tulsi's question about premix and premix analogs. Premix is a khichdi and premix analog is biryani. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, just a minute. We need to give a big hand to our chairperson, Dr. Tulsi, and a wonderful presentation by Dr. Saptarshi Bhattacharya. I am in a duel with him tomorrow evening in a webinar. He is the first speaker and the second speaker. Sir, do not carry any memories of this one. We are always friends. Sir, just please, 1 minute. I would request Dr. Tulsi to summarize this wonderful CME and the message of this CME for us.
Friends, what a nice CME you had today. So to summarize, probably it would be, individualized treatment. So no one size fits everybody. So individualized treatment depending upon the comorbidities that we have. Insulins are great molecules, and we must thank our Cipla team, the Himalaya